It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to a brand new edition of Rico Brogna. We got a lot to talk about on this brand new edition of Rico Brogna, episode number 448. We'll open up the Rico mailbag, so we'll be very interactive with you. We'll hit on a variety of topics. We'll start off with those who's hot in spring training and if they could take it into the start of the regular season. But I do want to let you know about our march towards opening day. Beginning on the Sunday edition of Rico Brogna, we are going to be on every single day until this season starts. We are going to march to opening day with a variety of Rico Brognas. We will count down some of the most memorable opening days of my lifetime. So for my lifetime, it's basically the early 90s to now. Memorable. So memorable will include some really good ones. They will include some really bad ones. We will make specific Met predictions about every aspect of this team. That'll be another edition of the Rico Brogna. We'll do our MLB predictions edition of Rico Brogna. And I'm hoping to bring something to the Rico that I haven't done in a very long time. We did this back on the old Evan Roberts podcast, and that is the Mets text chat that Pete Hoffman is not allowed to be on because he's still green with text messages, if you know what I mean. We are hoping to get all the guys from the Mets text chat, and so it will be a Mets text chat Rico Brogna edition. So you can hear what me, a buddy of mine from high school, another friend of mine, how we speak and get their views on the New York Mets. So we have a few live Ricos as we march towards opening day. But let's start off with the fact that I have to admit, and it makes no sense, but I'm giving you pure, true emotion, that it is now starting to worry me how hot Brett Baty is. It's worrying me. It's worrying me how hot Clay Holmes is. And there's no chance to rectify that because Clay Holmes completed his spring training season on Friday. And he was brilliant. He was brilliant again. He goes out and throws 5 scoreless innings. And I know you'd say, Evan, what the hell's the problem? Clay's making this easy transition, it seems, to being a starting pitcher. He just put together this great spring training. What could possibly be the problem? 19 innings, 2 earned runs, 22 strikeouts, 8 walks. It's all good. And it is good, but I'm starting to get worried that it's so dominant and he was so good in spring training that he's going to come out in Houston in less than a week and give up 5 runs in the first inning. Like, it worries me. It's an irrational worry. Like, performing really well in spring training should have no negative impact on the way the season starts. But I admit, as this game started on Friday afternoon, and I kind of had it to the side because the college basketball was the priority, and then we were on the air at 2 o'clock, I even said it to Tiki. I said, Tiki, I'd like to see Clay Holmes give up a 3-run home run early. And he even said, why? I said, I don't know. He's just been he's been too dominant. I mean, is that, Hoff, am I nuts? Is that my most irrational take to say I wanted to see Clay Holmes get beat up just a little bit because he's been too freaking good?
It's not dumb because, again, we've talked about how spring training, it's just like it means absolutely nothing. So for this to go so well, it's like, oh, no, when is the ball going to drop? I don't want to agree with you on this, but, yeah, I'm nervous.
I have this horrible feeling, and I hope I'm wrong. He's going to give up more runs in the first inning against the Astros on opening day than he's given up all of spring training. I have this feeling. Now, with that said, I want to tell you my reasonable, hope expectation for Clay Holmes on opening day is 5 1/3 innings, 2 runs. Like, if you can get the baseball into the 6th inning on opening day as your first real start as a major leaguer, and you give up 2 or 3 runs, a third will be okay. I would say, hey, that's a great success. So that's my expectation going into opening day. And I'm feeling the same way about Brett Baty. Brett Baty hit another home run on Friday afternoon. He has the highest OPS of anybody in spring training. And look, the truth is with Brett, we've talked about this a lot on the Rico. He's going to get this opportunity. He's got to go hit. He's been given many opportunities the last 3 years. He hasn't taken advantage of it. He's proven he can hit AAA pitching. He's proven he can hit spring training pitching. So it is going to be up to Brett Baty on March 27th to just perform. But every time he gets a hit now, I'm like, all right, Brett, we got the point. Can you save some for the start of the season?
Yeah, the Brett Baty one is, you know me, I'm a doubter with him. Until he does it in the regular season, I don't trust what he's doing right now for on spring training. And again, that sucks because he is so hot and he's earned that job. He's earned the second base job. He's earned the role at being an everyday player because he's had such a great spring. But again, I just don't trust it. I trust Clay Holmes more that he can go out there and pitch 5 good innings than rather than Brett Baty go out there and hit the way he's doing.
Well, he's going to get the chance. Like you said, he's earned it. He's going to be I don't want to say the opening day second baseman, but he's going to be the everyday second baseman. I was taking a look at who the Mets should face in Houston after opening day and who they should face in Miami the next 3 games of the season. And here's the reality. They're going to face Framber Valdez on opening day. So it is likelier than not that Luis Angel Acuna, assuming he makes the team, is going to be the opening day second baseman. But my calculations are telling me after opening day against Houston, they will see nothing but right-handed starting pitchers for the remainder of the Houston series, for all 3 games in Miami against the Marlins, because with Ryan Weathers, who got hurt, he was supposed to be the lone lefty in the Marlin rotation. They are all right-handed. So when they go to Miami, they'll face nothing but righties. They'll face nothing but righties when they take on Toronto. They have a complete right-handed rotation. They will face nothing but righties again when the Marlins face them again to close out that homestand. So they will not see a left-handed starting pitcher until potentially they go to Sacramento to face the A's. That's 11 straight games after opening day where, unless things change, unless there are injuries, obviously, they are scheduled to face right-handed starting pitchers. So expect a heavy dose of Brett Baty and really expect Luis Angel Acuna to be used in that super utility role if he does make the team. 2 other notes before we get to your emails. The Mets signed Billy McKinney, once a Met, always a Met. That is a pure depth move. He'll go down to AAA. We'll see what happens with Alexander Canario. Remember, they made the trade for Canario, but he has no more options left. So Marte is playing. We saw Starling Marte play the field on Friday, too. So he appears ready to go and will be the opening day DH, especially against the lefty. So there isn't room for Canario on this roster. So we'll see how that plays out with him. But Billy McKinney gives the Mets at least some depth in the outfield at the minor league level. The last thing I want to get to is A.J. Minter. So A.J. Minter needs to pass one more test to be on the opening day roster, and that is to pitch twice in 3 days. So apparently he's going to throw a bullpen session on Saturday, or I guess it's a live batting practice on Saturday, and that would then qualify. And if A.J. Minter comes out clean and comes out feeling well, he should make the team. Where does that leave Danny Young, who has no more options left? It's kind of interesting. When you look at the Met roster right now and you try to figure out, all right, how many spots are left and who is competing for these spots, you've got 5 starting pitchers, but really 6 with Paul Blackburn, who will make the team as a long reliever, assuming they give the spot to Tyler McGill. Now, obviously, they could just send Tyler McGill down. That could create an extra roster spot for them. But assuming, as the latest reports have had it, Tim Healy's report, or Tim Britton's report, again, as you know, I get the Tims confused, which I feel bad about, Senga, Peterson, Holmes, Canning, and McGill, with Blackburn going to the bullpen. For the sake of this brief discussion, let's say that's what it is. You've got your 5 starters, and here are your locked bullpen arms. Edwin Diaz, A.J. Minter if he comes out of this healthy, Ryan Stanek is 3, Jose Budo is 4, Reed Garrett is 5, Paul Blackburn is 6. That leaves you 2 more spots available. The 7th would be Dednell Nunez, if he's ready. Now, Dednell Nunez pitched on Friday. He gave up a home run, but he appears to be healthy. I'm skeptical, as I mentioned on the last Rico, that he will make the opening day roster. They may push it back just a little bit, give him an extended spring training, give him more time. I laid out the reasons why I wouldn't even have him on the roster. Just a quick thumbnail. They're not going to pitch him in back-to-back games. They're not going to pitch him in multiple innings. So you're basically giving yourself a mini handicap in that bullpen if Nunez is on the roster. So there are 2 roster spots left based on that thinking. Does Dednell Nunez take one of them? If he does, that leaves Danny Young, Max Kranick, Huascar Brazoban, Tyler Zuber for 1 spot. If Nunez goes on the IL, which I think he will, then it's a little bit easier to go, let's say, Kranick and Young. And I lean towards Young because he doesn't have any options left. Brazaban has options left. Zuber has options left. Even Kranick has options left. But speaking of Max Kranick, the first email I want to read is about Max Kranick, who I think has a great opportunity to make this bullpen with the way he's pitched. But it's written by Sam. Sam writes, "Good evening, Evan and Pete. I am drinking all the Max Kranick Kool-Aid. His stuff plays really well out of the bullpen, and I think he should get serious consideration for making this roster. I think he could be to us like what Luke Weaver was to the Yankees last year, a failed starter struggling to find a home that becomes a major contributor out of the pen. Am I an insane person for thinking this? Love the pod. Keep up the great work." You are not. And the reality is Sam actually wrote that email weeks ago because I tell you, I try to get to all the emails. Unfortunately, sometimes we run out of time. But I kept that one from Sam, even though he sent it literally 3 weeks ago, because it's timely right now. And give Sam credit because he was drinking the Kranick Kool-Aid, I think, before most of us have. I mean, look, Max Kranick is earning a roster spot. Hoff said it about Brett Baty. Let's say it about Max Kranick. He is earning a roster spot. Options or not, he should be on this team. If Dednell Nunez makes the team and they deem him healthy enough, that's even more of a reason why Kranick needs to be on the team because of his ability to go multiple innings. The Mets could set themselves up with a bullpen that features 2 of the 8 guys who could give you 2-3 innings out of the bullpen, Paul Blackburn and Max Kranick. And I think it's really important to have 2 guys who can do it. Why, you ask? One, I don't know how deep a lot of these starters are going first 2 times around. Let's start with Clay Holmes. Now, Clay has worked his up. He's worked up his pitch count. He's worked up his innings. He's also never gone twice, 3 times around a batting order. You know, I started this podcast by saying, boy, I'd be thrilled if he gave us 5 1/3 innings, 5 2/3 innings. I don't know if Carlos Mendoza is going to give him that opportunity. I'd be very curious to see how quick Mendy is on that hook with Clay. So I think there's going to be multiple times early in the season, or at least first time around the rotation, where you're not getting 5 innings out of your starters. Well, if that's the case, you're going to want multiple innings out of somebody. Think about the way that bullpen is lined up. How many times is Edwin Diaz going to go multiple innings? How many times is Ryan Stanek going to go multiple innings? Even Jose Budo. You know, we saw Budo pitch multiple innings last year and then not be available for days at a time. Are the Mets going to treat Budo more as a 3-out guy so he can pitch multiple days? We'll see. But I think Kranick brings a value to this bullpen because of his ability to go multiple innings. And look, what Sam said, Kranick looks great. It is not insane to dream here in late March that Max Kranick could turn into a Luke Weaver type reliever. That's what happens with relievers all the time. So we'd be really excited about it. It would be the best case scenario. But as we sit here today, less than a week before the season starts, I expect Max Kranick to make the team, and I'd be disappointed if he's not on the team. Noah writes, guys, here's something I haven't heard discussed. Last year, David Stearns put together a pitching rotation on the cheap by signing guys who had not pitched a full season the year before, and it worked out very well until the playoffs when they clearly ran out of gas. He has set up the 2025 Mets in the exact same situation. Neither Senga, Holmes, nor Peterson threw anything close to a starter's workload last season. If the Mets go deep in the playoffs, they'll be expected to throw 20 to 30 innings beyond a regular workload. Can we expect them to be effective in those innings? Will they at least be at their best when the games count the most? So maybe it's not a bad thing that Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea are missing time to non-arm related injuries. It'll keep their innings down and keep them fresher for the playoffs. I'll never root for an injury, but to me, this is at least a silver lining. I mean, in theory, Sean Manaea, if he picks up where he left off, is in a spot where he will not be nearly as worn down as he was last year because he's going to make fewer starts. But I also think your point about the way the Mets wore down late last year is another reason why, even forgetting the Senga factor, having a 6-man rotation makes a lot of sense. It does, because do the math. It's 162 games. If you kept to a 6-man rotation the entire season, 162 divided by 6, you're talking about 27 starts. So it lessens the workload that way by asking your starters to not have to make as many starts in a given season. Speaking of the rotation and the way they're going to line it up, you kind of drop the hints from Carlos Mendoza on what's going down. Clay Holmes is clearly starting opening day. That's been announced. David Peterson and Kodai Senga will not pitch in Houston. In fact, reportedly, they're going to stay back in Florida and kind of get ready for the second series of the year in Miami against the Marlins, throw some bullpens, and be ready. That leaves Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill for Game 2 and Game 3 of the season. It also sets up whoever pitches Game 2 to pitch the home opener, as we've discussed. But I charted it out with the off days. Obviously, rainouts, you can never predict. The Mets will ask only one starting pitcher in the first 3 weeks of the season to pitch on 4 days rest, which is called regular rest. 4 days rest. You've got your first turnaround, and then Clay Holmes comes back with an extra day of rest. Griffin Canning has 2 extra days of rest. Tyler McGill would have 2 extra days of rest. Peterson, Senga, and Holmes would have an extra day of rest. Whoever starts the second game of the year, I'm going to guess Griffin Canning, would be the first pitcher to pitch on quote-unquote regular rest. That's if the Mets choose to. They could insert a 6th starter on April 9th. That's the finale of the homestand, the last game against Miami. But if they want to keep it at 5 for a little bit longer, Griffin Canning would be the first starting pitcher to pitch on quote-unquote regular rest. Then Tyler McGill would have an extra day of rest. David Peterson, 5 days. Senga, 5 days. Holmes, 5 days. Canning, 5 days. Again, without inserting another starter, the next time they would have to pitch anybody on quote-unquote regular rest would be the finale against Minnesota on April 16th. And they will not need a 6th starting pitcher, assuming they don't want to play with these off days, until April 18th at home against the St. Louis Cardinals. Is that a reasonable return date for Sean Manaea? Probably another week or two for Manaea, but it's not that far off. So that's the way the Met rotation is lining up. Let's go to the next email. Let's hear from Matt. Matt writes, I listened to what you said a few weeks ago about Steve Cohen's comments about attendance and a veiled threat of sorts that maybe he'll tighten the budget if the Met fans don't show up again. I agree with almost all of your Met takes, but I am not buying this one. Steve Cohen is a winner and a competitor. You can't make the money he's made without being that way. He continuously says, I want to win during his interviews. He has shown emotion enjoying the team win and always mentions the pride in their efforts. Until he gets that World Series we all desperately want, no matter how few seats are filled in the ballpark, he is going to keep pushing. He wants to be in the center of a rocking Citi Field as a hero to all of us. Nothing will ever satisfy him. He's a man with everything except the championship. Maybe after he has a few rings on his fingers, he will want to cut back on the spending if he doesn't feel his investment is being appreciated. If that's the case, I think that's fine with me. At least for a little while, we'll get greedy again. Well, this goes back to Cohen saying numerous times he wasn't happy with the attendance last year. And I certainly read into those comments, which is, hey, we don't make the money like the Yankees. We don't make the money like the LA Dodgers. I'm spending my own money. And if I'm spending my own money, I want you guys to show up. So, look, there's no way to prove this unless a few things happen that I hope doesn't happen. Number one, the Mets don't draw well. I think the Mets are going to draw well. I'm seeing early indications, just as being a season ticket holder, that the Mets are a hot ticket. So I think they will draw well. And if they draw well, then I think it kind of defeats the whole, well, Steve is threatening Met fans, you better show up or I won't spend. Well, if they show up, there's no worry. So I don't know if we'll ever find out the answer. I hope we don't find out the answer. But remember this, Matt. Steve has said numerous times that he doesn't want to spend at the pace this team is spending. Like, there is a budget. It may feel unlimited at times, but there's a budget. And so I think eventually, even if the team isn't winning, eventually I think he may hold back going up to 325 or 350 when it comes to payroll. I hope that's not the case. I also hope that the Mets are in a position where they don't need a $350 million payroll. And that's the overall point. It's the point Hal Steinbrenner's made. It's the point Steve Cohen has made, which is if we develop enough good young players, we're not going to need to go out and spend that kind of crazy money. This is an email from Jackson with some random Mets thoughts. So let's hit a few of them. Evan, thank God baseball's almost here. We're all familiar with the biggest question marks surrounding the Mets at this point, but there are a few others that are nagging at me, and I can't help but feel are going to be really important. Number one, stop walking the ballpark. Mets pitchers walked way too many batters last season. According to Baseball Reference, the league average for walks per nine was 3.1 in 2024. The Mets had a rate of 3.7, worst in the NFL. NFL, geez, I'm thinking football. Worst in the NL, and third worst in all of Major League Baseball, only ahead of the White Sox and the Angels. I looked up the 2024 walks per nine rate for the most important new pitchers. Minter was better than league average, 2.9. Holmes was at exactly league average, and Canning and Montas were worse than average. And I know he's not a new pitcher, but Kodai Senga, 4.2 in 2023, will be back in the rotation as well. Minter and Holmes are fine, but Senga, Canning, and Montas, when he returns, are going to log important innings for the Mets this season, so this is pretty concerning for me. Before we get to point number two, you're right about point number one. Like, the walks were a major issue last year, and I think at times what made it worse is some guys on this team, specifically guys in the bullpen, specifically Edwin Diaz, do such a terrible job of holding guys on. So what really makes things worse is not only putting a guy on base with a walk, but then allowing them to get into scoring position basically immediately by stealing a bag. So far here in spring training, and again, you take these numbers with a grain of salt, the walks have been down. That is certainly a big, big positive, but you're right. This was a big bugaboo for the Mets last year. And when you look at the guys that are being inserted, including Kodai Senga, who, like you mentioned, didn't pitch last year, it is likelier than not that the Mets are going to be below average when it comes to throwing strikes. The key is, and this is what I'm looking for overall with the pitching staff, is don't be the worst. Don't be third worst in baseball with only the White Sox and the Angels behind you. Be 20th in walks. Be 18th in walks. It's never going to turn into a rotation of Greg Maddux, but you can't be as bad as you were last year. Number two from Jackson, beat up the bad competition. You touched on it briefly on the last Rico Brogna, but in a tough NL, the Mets really need to take advantage of the bad teams this season. I consider the true bottom feeders to be the Nationals, Marlins, Pirates, Rockies, White Sox, and Angels. Last year, the Mets went a combined 31-14 against those teams, an excellent mark, though going 7-6 against Miami hurt. If my math is right, this season they have 44 games against those teams. Give me 30-14 against them. That way, you just have to go 500 against the rest of the MLB to get to 89 wins, which should be enough to make the postseason. Boy, I'll tell you, I wrestle what that number is. Last year, it turned out to be 89. It was 89 barely. It was 89 with tiebreakers, So I don't know if 89 is the magic number. I think it's got to be over 90. I really do. I think the National League is that good and that competitive where to make the postseason, which is the goal, I think the number has to be over 90. To win the division, it's obviously going to have to be higher than that. But you're right, Jackson, I think this every single year. Beat up the bad teams, average against the good teams. And you're right. It's exactly what they did last year. Number three from Jackson is the Mendy magic reel. I'd be very curious to see if Mendoza keeps his magic touch going. There were a lot of times he did things off the beaten path last season that ended up working out, especially in regards to the feel for his pitchers. You complained about a lot of his moves last year, but you also heaped a lot of praise on him at times. I did the same, and that's how it goes when managers rely on their gut a lot. Is the Mendy magic a flash in the pan or a real thing? We'll see. In any case, I'm cautiously optimistic for the Mets this year. I expect at least high 80s in wins and a postseason berth unless the NL is insane this year, which it might be. Here's to another season of Mets baseball. I think that there's always going to be, with any manager, a lot of moves that work, that we don't like, moves that don't work, that we do like, and vice versa. What I really liked about Mendy last year, and you touched on it, was a combo of gut and stats. And I think that's how you got to manage these days. I go back to, I give you a stat thing more than just analytics, and then a gut thing. I remember when during the Subway Series, he wouldn't start Luis Severino. He was insistent on the lefties going against the Yankees. He went by the numbers and it worked. The Yankees struggled against lefties all season long, and they struggled against David Peterson and Sean Manaea. So we're going to see a lot of, hey, go by the book. But Mendy also had a lot of gut feelings, especially when deciding when to keep starting pitchers in and when to take starting pitchers out. So we'll see if Mendy can keep it up. By the way, you can knock one out of the park this year when you head out to Citi Field. Raise the apple with Takara Chuhai. It's a sparkling cocktail that blends real shochu spirits with the delicious flavors of fruits locally grown in Japan. It's available at Citi Field in Fuji apple, of course, white peach, and lemon. The official sake of not just the New York Mets, but Rico Brogna. I like this email from Michael. I had mentioned a while ago, maybe months ago, that this Met team is reminding me of 2006. Now, season hasn't started, so I'm talking about the way the team is built, how they're going to have to win games. If you think back to 2006, they had a loaded lineup. They had average pitching. Granted, they had a lot of big names in their pitching staff, but it was an average pitching staff, and they had a really good bullpen. And as we sit here trying to be optimistic before another season, if the Mets are going to be successful, to me, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a really good lineup. It's going to be average starting pitching. If the Mets have a great starting pitching staff, then let's party, but just be average and have a really good bullpen. So Michael expounded on the thought of the 06 Mets versus the 25 Mets. Evan, this year's team resembles more of 2006 that won 97 games. Great offense, average at best starting pitching, and a good bullpen. People are complaining about our rotation this upcoming year, so I decided to look at the numbers for every starter that the Mets had make a start during the 2006 season. The Mets did have a lot of injuries in the rotation that year, a grand total of 13 pitchers made starts, and here are their ERAs. I'm going to go through this, and I want you to think about all the guys that may start for the Mets this season and what we would think about these ERAs. I think that's a fair exercise. So obviously, we have a pretty good idea of 8 guys who should make starts this year. 8 guys. We've got the 6 right now: Clay Holmes, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, Paul Blackburn. Those are your 6. 2 others, Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas, will eventually make starts. And then you throw in a guy like Brandon Sproat, who may make a start at some point this season. And obviously more guys, though I hope it's not too many more guys. So we're looking at 9 right there. The Mets had 13 in 2006. Let's go through some of the numbers. Tommy Glavine was one of 2 guys that made 30-plus starts. He made 32 starts and had a 3.82 ERA. Not great, but okay. High 3. Steve Traxel made 30 starts that year and had a 4.97 ERA. Not very good. Let's go through the rest. Brian Bannister made 8 starts that year before he got hurt, 4.26. Jeremy Gonzalez made 3 starts, 7.71 ERA. El Duque made 20 starts, 4.09. Jose Lima made 4 starts, 9.87. John Maine made 15 starts, 3.60. The Hall of Famer Pedro Martinez made 23 starts, 4.48. Young Mike Pelfrey made 4 starts, 5.48 ERA. This is brutal, by the way. I mean, this is worse than you could have remembered, right? Oliver Perez made 7 starts, 6.38. Alay Soler, I remember the one he made against the Yankees in the Subway Series. 8 starts, 6.00 ERA. Dave Williams made 5 starts, 5.59 ERA. And finally, Victor Zambrano, 5 starts, 6.75. Bro, it is almost surprising how just absolute garbage our pitching was when you hear the numbers. Like, I knew they didn't have a great staff. Obviously, it's a part of why I use it as a comparison, but you got to think, Hoff, it should be easy and I don't want to jinx anything, but shouldn't it be easy for the Mets to match, if not destroy, these numbers? These are horrible numbers. You're on mute, by the way, so you got to unmute yourself.
Hold on.
There you go.
I was doing it for the people. I thought the people didn't want to hear from me. No, listen, I got to be honest. When you go through some of those names, I get really bad flashbacks, not the good ones. I honestly, we know this pitching staff is not going to be the top of the league, but in a mediocre, I feel like baseball right now is so mediocre that so many pitching staffs just can't figure it out. There's very few aces that go 6, 7, 8, 9 innings. You're going to have to rely on your bullpen. These numbers are extremely obtainable to beat. And all you have to do, we've said it so many times, if you can have a solid pitcher go and give up 2-3 runs a game, it's going to be about 4.5. That's all it is. And that should be enough. And I think this pitching staff will achieve that.
That year, just to hear a breakdown, they had the 16th best ERA from starters. You would have guessed worse based on those numbers, but it was actually 16th in baseball with a 4.67 ERA. But what the Mets had that year, and they have not matched this since. In fact, in my history as a Met fan, which, like I said, early 90s is what I remember, they had the best ERA they've ever had out of their bullpen, at least in terms of league ranks. They had the second best ERA in Major League Baseball from their bullpen arms that year, a very low 3.28 ERA, which is sort of unheard of. The Mets, we haven't had a lot of great bullpens. Like even last year, it was 17th in Major League Baseball with a 4.03 ERA. So obviously what they were able to do to balance out how mediocre to bad the rotation was, their bullpen was great. I mean, a second best ERA in all of baseball, 3.28. But that's where the Mets have to make up for their rotation if it is mediocre, and that is to have a really good bullpen. But boy, you look at those numbers. They're bad. I mean, the best starting pitcher was clearly Tommy Glavine because, he made the 32 starts, and he had a sub-4 ERA, which basically nobody else had. It's also a different time. I admit that. There were more runs scored in 2006. So, like, for example, that year the Mets scored over 5 runs per game. That was not the best in baseball. That was not the second best in baseball. It was actually 7th in runs scored. Now, you think of that lineup, and you think of how good it was, and you think of that as maybe the best offense in baseball, kind of the way we look at this lineup right now. But I do think this lineup has a chance to be better. I do, because what they have, if you look top to bottom, is I think a depth to this lineup and even the potential to be better than what it just is on paper, because you got a guy like Brett Baty who could very well blossom. You have a guy like Francisco Alvarez who, when he comes back, could very well blossom. So I do think that this lineup has a chance to be better and should be better than the 2016, which is very, very high praise. What they may not have in some areas is their defense. David Wright was a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. Jose Reyes was a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. I remember Jose Valentin played very good defense that year at second base. Obviously, Carlos Beltran was a Gold Glove center fielder. This team's defense, we'll see. I mean, obviously, Lindor is fantastic. Vientos has gotten better, but he's average. We'll see about who ends up playing second base. Obviously, it's still a new position for Brett Baty. But I do think overall the 2006 comp makes a lot of sense on where this team can go.
Well, up the middle, for example, the one thing I won't be worried too much about besides Baty is up the middle, because whether it's Siri or Taylor, you got Lindor, shortstop, and Torrens. I know he's not going to be the hitter that Francisco Alvarez is, but defensively, he is a much better fielder, that's for sure.
Excellent defender and shuts down the running game. Good email, though, Michael. We appreciate it. Thank you for supplying all that great information. Let's hear from Matthew about the schedule. Evan Hoff, big fan of the podcast, been listening to the fan for a long time, done a great job. Thank you. We appreciate it. I'm reaching out because I was hoping to get your thoughts on how much importance you place on the Mets' record versus the Phillies and the Braves this season as an indicator of where they land in the divisional race. Last year, the Braves were 14-12 versus the Mets and Phillies. The Phillies were 13-13 against the other two teams. The Mets were 12-14. And as a side note, the Braves and Mets weren't potentially also 13-13 because game 162 turned out to be meaningless for the Mets. The fact that the three teams beat each other up while having various successes versus Miami and Washington, Atlanta really screwed itself going 5-8 against the Nats in 2024 might make this a wash, but I feel like the team's bulking up in different ways. The Braves are healthier, Phillies added to their already good rotation, and the Mets got Juan Soto and new starters. I think it's imperative the Mets are able to hold their own at the very least against Philly and Atlanta this year, with the Marlins and Nats being expected doormats that the teams need to beat up on. Thank you again. Yeah, we talked about this before, the importance of beating the teams you're supposed to beat and then just being decent against your division rivals. Couple of notes about the schedule, though, that I do find interesting. Number one, and you probably know this already, 3 off days in the first 12 games. That is helping their rotation. It's allowing the manipulation to make sure no one actually has to pitch on regular rest. It's also, assuming no rainouts, cause doubleheaders, or change that, allows you to rest this bullpen. We talked earlier about Dednell Nunez, a guy who may not be able to pitch on back-to-back days. The Mets may be very careful with A.J. Minter. The off days allow the Mets early this season to be careful with 3 off days in the first 12 games. They also have that off day on Sunday, which is very weird. They also play 12 of their first 18 games against American League teams. I don't think that's negative, positive, or anything. It's just more of an anomaly of the fact that interleague play is every day. The other thing is they do not play the Atlanta Braves until mid-June. Now, that's a bad thing, in my opinion, because the Braves are dealing with a lot of injuries to start the year. We all know about Acuna, Spencer Strider. They did just bring in Alex Verdugo to give them some help. They also have the injury to Sean Murphy. They're dealing with a lot of injuries, and the Mets won't be able to take advantage of it because they don't play the Braves. They play them later, much later. And then once they start playing them in mid-June, they're done with them in late August. August 24th is the last game they play against Atlanta. So June, July, August is bunched together, and then it's over. Speaking of August, 19 of 28 games at home in the month of August. The negative to that, in September, only 1 homestand the entire month. They play 16 of 27 games on the road in the month of September. So a couple of notes about the schedule. Now, as far as the division is concerned, I put a poll out the other day, and I get it. It's Twitter. It's not official. What does it actually mean? And it was very straightforward. It said, who will win the NL East? The Mets, the Phillies, the Braves, or were we going to get a shocker from Washington and Miami? Washington and Miami got 3% of the vote, but the Mets won. So Met fans are having a little confidence they can win this division. They got 45% of the vote, but I was really interested in the second one. Like, I almost want to put a poll out that says, who do you fear the most, or who do you look at as the biggest threat to the Mets? And honestly, the answer is both, but which one do you look at as a bigger threat, the Phillies or the Braves? And the Braves won that thing by 12%, 32% for Atlanta, 20% for Philadelphia. Here's the thing about the Braves. They didn't have a sexy offseason. They didn't. They're dealing with a lot of injuries. All that is absolutely true, and I remain very skeptical that Chris Sale is going to be able to back up the Cy Young year of last year. But this is a Brave team that won 89 games last year, despite a myriad of injuries, despite really having a down season. They won 89 games. It took everything in our soul for us to outlast them. And we really didn't even outlast them because they technically finished ahead of us. So, did we really outlast them? So I look at the Braves as the bigger threat than Philadelphia. Now, I think the Phillies are very good. They added Jesus Luzardo, who I think will have a bounce back year. Zach Wheeler has taken the mantle as the most reliable starting pitcher in baseball. And maybe it's just in my DNA because of what Atlanta has done to us in the past. But I do put the Braves up there as the biggest threat in the National League East. I mentioned we're doing our March to opening day with a lot of Ricos, and one of the Ricos will be MLB predictions. We'll put all our predictions out there. I haven't fully pulled the trigger on it yet, but as we sit here today, I am leaning towards the Atlanta Braves winning the National League East. And I hope I'm wrong, obviously. Now, let's get to a few. Go ahead, Hoff. I apologize.
Yeah, by the way, I did participate in that poll, and I too picked the Braves. So not great, but I listen, how can you knock the Braves at all? They continue to every single year just put together a great team. And again, like what David Stearns did last year when he realized things weren't working out. A couple of years ago when they won the World Series, a few years ago when they won the World Series, they had to replace an entire outfield.
Yeah.
And they did it, and they won a World Series. So, I mean, last year was an anomaly, to be honest with you, that they were that close to not making the playoffs.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Atlanta Braves for them had a bad year. They won 89 games, and that was the same amount of games we won. And then you look through at like their seasons last year. Michael Harris missed a bunch of time. Matt Olson had one of the dog crappiest years he's ever had. He actually ended up finishing strong and put up decent numbers, but remember how bad Matt Olson was for a big part of the season. And you look up and down their lineup, like Austin Riley missed a bunch of time. The one like certainty they had was Marcelo Zuna, but the rest of it was either down years or injured years from everybody in their lineup. Then they got a great year out of Chris Sale. They did lose Max Fried, who I get. They lost Charlie Morton. Like, I'm not minimizing what they've lost, but I don't know. I kind of expect a lot of guys in that lineup are going to have bounce back seasons, and they're going to win more than 89 games. Connor writes, guys, Met fans asking for us to trade good prospects are driving me nuts. I don't get it. I will try, but I don't get it. I have two theories. First, these Met fans are suffering from the basic age-old short-term versus long-term gratification problem. They are people who would fail the marshmallow test. Aside, I would give you a quick Google search. The Stanford marshmallow experiment led by psychologist Walter Mischel in 1970 tested children's ability to delay gratification. Preschoolers were left alone. I've heard about this, by the way. This I'm very aware of. Preschoolers were left alone with a marshmallow and told they'd receive a second one if they waited 15 minutes. The study found that children who waited longer to receive the second marshmallow were more successful as adults with higher SAT scores, better social and cognitive functioning, and lower BMIs. Well, the lower BMI thing, I kind of get. It's basically like, just give it to me. If I'm eating the one, even though eating the two should raise it, but you know what? You showed a lot of restraint, which proves, I guess, you can do it. Second, and less offensively, these fans misunderstood how you win a World Series. You don't win a World Series by being the best team in the league in a particular year. Baseball playoffs are just too random. You win a World Series by being a playoff team year in and year out. If I were the Mets, and I'm confident David Stearns does something similar, I'd be making moves with the aim to maximize my collective playoff qualification chances over whatever time horizon you believe is subject to a predictive forecast. Say 5 to 7 years, maybe 10 years. I don't know, but I bet Stearns does. We already have a team that should make the playoffs. Of course, we should attempt to make the team better, but we should not attempt to make the team better in a way that makes future teams worse. Just put a team on the field that should make the playoffs and then do it again and again and again. And that's how we win the World Series. Connor, I agree with the sentiment that just make the playoffs year after year after year, and good things will eventually happen and get hot at the right time. And I am not one who just wants to trade prospects for the immediate gratification, but there are moments where striking makes sense. I want to use the Yankees as an example. And I'll ask Connor this. Did the Yankees make a mistake trading for Juan Soto? It was a one-year rental, and let's face it, a lot of trades that are made at the deadline are rentals. They are, we're trying to win a championship. This guy gives us a better chance. We're going to trade up big prospects. We're going to get that guy. We may re-sign them. You never know, but we're trying to win a championship. So I think using someone who gave you the absolute best result. He was MVP caliber. He helped you make the playoffs. He helped you get to a World Series, and then he left. And it sucks that he left, but it also sucks that you gave up a guy like Michael King, amongst others. Was that a mistake? Was that a mistake? Because answer that question to know what's worth it and what's not worth it. Because, yeah, winning a World Series is tough, but that means we should never go balls to the walls and make a big trade. I disagree. I didn't want to do it last year because the circumstances were different last year. But in a year like this, let's see who the player is. Let's see who the prospects are. Let's see what kind of season they're having. I don't think it's just purely, hey, that's a really good prospect who can help us for 10 years. I don't want to make that trade because I'm doing it for a rental. And that's my only issue, Connor, with what you're saying. It's almost, if that guy is only going to be here for a short term, and yes, getting hot in the playoffs is luck, do I want to trade a guy who could potentially help us for 5 to 7 years? If the answer is no, then you're never making trades. Then the only trades you're going to make are going to be for average guys who may make a big impact, you never know, but could also be Daniel Vogelbach and Darren Ruff. Speaking of prospects, Chris from South Jersey, different angle on this. Hoff and Evan. First off, I want to say thanks for the tremendous job you guys do on the Rico. As a big sports fan and diehard Mets fan, I love watching the Rico on YouTube. It's the only podcast I consume. Very much appreciate that. We appreciate who watch on YouTube. We appreciate those that download the podcast and are listening in their car right now. Thank you very much. And Evan, being the same age as you and a listener back to your early days with Joe on the Fan, I think you're as real a sports fan as it comes, and I greatly value your opinions and insights. I continue to enjoy listening to you today with Tiki and the crew. Thank you very much. With the compliments out of the way, I wanted to get to my ask. Listening to the episode from this past Sunday where you opened up the mailbag, and particularly the Acuna, Baty, and Ronnie Mauricio talk, it prompted me to want to send this email. I've been thinking all offseason about some of the Mets' top prospects and how they potentially fit on the team in the short term and in the future. I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions, whether as a response to this email when opening up the mailbag or possibly as a topic for an actual future episode. Well, here we are. Specifically, when you look at the fact the Mets have multiple highly touted position players with not a lot of position spots open, how do you see it shaking out over the next few years? In my mind, you have Luis Santa Acuna, Brett Baty, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, and Ronnie Mauricio. But with the emergence of Mark Vientos and the long-term contracts of Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, and Juan Soto, plus the hopes that many fans either have for Pete Alonso returning or Vlad Guerrero Jr. manning first base for the next several years, there's no way there's going to be enough available spots for all these young players. Seems like you really just have center field, second base, if McNeil gets traded, and possibly DH. So who ultimately stays and finds a home on this Mets team, and who gets traded, maybe for Sandy Alcantara, or even who flames out and just doesn't end up being a viable major leaguer? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Well, the last thing you said is truly what's going to happen. A lot of guys are going to flame out, and that sucks. And I don't want to tell you, yeah, Jet Williams, he's going to flame out. I hope Jet Williams is a star. And I don't know enough yet to predict, hey, he's going to be a star or he's never going to make it. He had a lost year last year. I think there's a big year for Jet. I think this is an even bigger year for Drew Gilbert. You talk about guys who had lost years last year. Drew Gilbert had a lost year. And this is the moment where either he loses his prospect status or he makes his mark. So I think we're going to know the answer on Drew Gilbert by the end of the season. As far as what's available for the New York Mets, I hate to say this because we're about to begin a year. There's a part of me that thinks if any of these young guys emerge, we're going to get what we feared this year, which is Vientos playing first base and Alonso gone and Vlad not being here. And whether it's Ronnie Mauricio or it's the emergence of Brett Baty, like legitimately having a big time year, that could be one of the spots. But second base is clearly a spot. Center field is clearly a spot. And DH is clearly a spot. DH is wide open. Like the Mets are going into this season with two guys in contract years in Jesse Winker and Starling Marte as their DH. So DH is clearly open. Center field is clearly open. Second base, like you talked about, will be open. And so because all prospects don't pan out, I don't think the Mets have a logjam. They'll have a logjam once guys prove it. And there's a long way to go before guys prove it. But you wanted me to guess. I'll give you some guesses. I think Ronnie Mauricio ends up becoming the designated hitter for this team in the short term and then eventually forces his way to third base. That could mean Vientos moves to first. It could mean Vientos ends up at DH. And then hopefully somebody, whether it's Luis Angel Acuna converting to center field or Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams having big years down in the minor leagues, becomes the center fielder. That is certainly the hope. But good email. Definitely appreciate it. Last one I want to read today. This is from Eric Jones. It's called Life Without Pete Alonso. Love your podcast. I've listened to just about every Mets podcast under the sun. Yours hands down the best. Thanks for what you do. We appreciate it. Here's my question. Imagine a world where Pete Alonso hasn't signed yet. How much different would the vibe be around the camp and the start of this season? I'm really happy he decided not to be a distraction in spring training. He seems to have almost faded in the background while we talk about Clay Holmes, Brett Baty, and of course, Juan Soto. Well, to answer your question, is Pete signed or is Pete waiting? If Pete is waiting, it is a massive distraction where we're not talking about anything other than when is Pete Alonso going to be signed? What's going to happen to Pete Alonso? And that would have been all around bad. If Pete had left right before, instead of signing with the Mets, he goes to Toronto. He goes to wherever he goes. He goes to Chicago. I think we would have been angry. Would we be optimistic? I think there'd be more of a mixed bag in terms of optimism. I think that the pitching injuries would have hurt more because we'd look at this lineup and say it's good, but it's missing something. I think that Baty's resurgence in spring training would have been met with, all right, well, go out and do it now during the regular season, as opposed to us basically saying, you know what? Second base is open. Let's see what you got. Like right now, there's pressure on Brett Baty to prove he's a major leaguer, but there isn't pressure on Brett Baty to be a force in this lineup. It's almost an added luxury if he is. If Pete wasn't here, I think we'd be viewing the Baty resurgence a little bit differently. So the truth is, Eric, thank God Pete's here, because I don't think the mood would be the same. And lastly, James was not happy because I misremembered something last time. And I did. I was confusing opening day 22, opening day 23, and when when the Seaver statue came out. Which year was it? James writes, Evan, I have to say I'm surprised at you. The reason you should have immediately remembered that the Seaver statue was unveiled in 2022 is that Jacob deGrom himself was in attendance at the ceremony, which led to an immediate burst of discourse that he, one, understands and values the importance of great starting pitching to Mets history, and two, understands his own place as a contribution, as a continuation of his legacy, and three, would consequently be re-signing with the Mets at the end of the season. As the premier DeGrom aficionado in the fan base, you should have been all over this one. You know what? Now that DeGrom's gone, I guess I forget about the little signs, the little hints of, ooh, he wants to be a Met. Ooh, he wants to stay. Yeah, I honestly forgot. Unfortunately, I think what happens with years, things start to kind of mush together. You don't forget things necessarily, but you forget the year. And that's why on the next edition of the Rico Brogna, I'm very excited. We are going to go through some of the most memorable opening days in my lifetime. And so that's for a lot of us in our lifetime. Some, you may not remember it. Some are a little bit older, and they're like, you're not going back far enough. But I'm really keeping it from 1992 on because, honestly, it wouldn't be fair to call it memorable. I don't personally remember it. So we will go the last 30-plus years in Met history and go through some of the more memorable opening days. There are some good. There are some bad. It'll get you all hot and bothered as we creep closer and closer to opening day. We'll make our Mets predictions. We will do MLB predictions. We got a lot to do as we march to opening day here on the Rico Brogna. You can email us anytime. As we've shown you today, we try to get to all of your emails at some point. TheRicoB@gmail.com, TheRicoMe@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for subscribing. Remember, subscribe to the Rico Brogna. You don't want to miss out. Sometimes we pop out late night, Friday night, Saturday morning Rico Brognas. Thank you very much for listening to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.